Coming to you from Kansas City, Missouri, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. I'm Lauren Palmer, partner with EverStrive Solutions, and your host for this episode. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. You can support GovLove by joining ELGL and taking advantage of incredible professional development opportunities like the upcoming Camp GovLife, the 2025 ELGL Annual Conference in Santa Rosa, California, coming up in October. Join me and our entire group of incredible camp counselors to learn, grow, and make memories with fellow public servants. You can visit elgl.org today to learn more and secure your spot. Also this year, we are celebrating 10 years of the GovLove podcast. Help us commemorate this important milestone by calling the GovLove hotline at 720-282-1752. That's 720-282-1752. We invite you to leave us a message, share one of your favorite GovLove memories, or give us a prediction for what you think a local government will be like over the next 10 years. You might just be featured on a future episode of GovLove. And now on with our show. My guest today is Rebekkah Smith Aldrich, a founder and board member of the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. SLI empowers library leaders to advance environmentally sound, socially equitable, and economically feasible practices to intentionally address climate change and co-create thriving communities. Rebekkah is going to tell us more about the resources available through SLI and help us shine a light on the important and sometimes overlooked role that libraries are playing as leaders in climate action and climate resiliency. Rebekkah, welcome to GovLove.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join us. So we are going to get started with a lightning round. I'm going to throw you a few questions just to get to know you a little bit better. And a first question, I couldn't resist. Since you're a librarian, I have to ask, what's something you're reading that you would recommend to our listeners?
Well, like a true librarian, I have multiple books going at once. So I thought I would just share what I'm reading in fiction and nonfiction right now. So my husband and I are reading the same fiction book, so we can chat about it while we're driving around. We're reading A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, which is a sci-fi series. And my nonprofit read right now is Forest Euphoria by Patricia Cassian, who's a professor here in my region. But it's an awesome book about her growing up in the Hudson Valley and really how crazy weird nature is and how she discovered that as a kid, just kind of traipsing through the woods, and it really guided her studies over time. And it really relates, I think, to my own experience growing up here in the Hudson Valley of New York and being outside a lot and really just being so curious about nature, which is one of the things librarians love, is helping curious people learn more.
Great. Forest Euphoria. Did I get
Yeah.
that? I'm really interested that you said you and your husband read the same fiction book so you can chat about it. So, do you read it together? Are you are you reading chapters aloud, or are you just reading separately and then kind of book clubbing on it?
We have these really good intentions of book clubbing it. So we read it at our own pace. And then once how's it going? What part are you on? That type of thing. But I'm always behind. So he finishes books light years before me and I'm catching up what feels like the whole year sometimes.
I feel that deeply. All right, next question. Since you mentioned curiosity, who is someone dead or alive that you would enjoy having dinner with?
This is a tough question, Lauren. There are so many people to choose from that are interesting, but I'll just give you the first name that popped in my head, which was the author Octavia Butler. She wrote the Parable of the Sower series and Kindred, her most famous book. But I felt she was someone who really could kind of see the future. And I just think it would be fascinating to understand where her thought process came from and what shaped her thinking, because so many things that she wrote into those books in the 70s and 80s have come true today. And it's just very interesting to think about the pattern recognition that she had back then that is really coming true today.
Incredible. That's a very unorthodox answer, which I love. You're kind of challenging me to think about the question in a different way. So thank you. All right. And then final lightning round question. What's your most controversial non-political opinion?
I don't know how non-controversial or how controversial this will be as a non-political opinion.
Well, we'll see.
But I debate pretty consistently with my husband and dad. I think there's way too many pitcher changes in Major League Baseball. It's slow down the game to the point where I feel like I can barely watch it. So I want to see more restrictions on how many pitchers can pitch in one game.
Okay. I'm not a sports person, but I'm in a family of dedicated sports people and especially MLB. So I'm kind of learn through osmosis. What are your thoughts on the pitch clock?
I like that.
You like
I want a little more pace going there. I want to go a little faster.
So you're a fan of like picking up the game.
I like it. Yeah. Yeah. I got things to do, Lauren. We're busy over here.
I hear you, but like, I mean, it's hard on those pitchers. That's like hard work to be out there slinging it. I get the pitching change up, but I hear you. Like,
I think there could be better balance. Let's say that. I'm not going to be predictive of what it has to look like. I just think we need a better balance than we've got right now.
okay, Govlove baseball fan listeners, let us know if you think Rebekah's on base about this. If we've introduced some controversy here into
I was
our.
going to talk about fluffernutters, but I thought that would just blow up the internet. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, a recurring theme is a hot dog a sandwich? I mean, I feel like we've had that argument many times on Govlove. Fluff or not would be the next big thing. All right, well, let's get into the heart of our interview. I'm really eager to have this conversation with you today. Of course, we're here to learn more about Sustainable Libraries Initiative, but first, just tell us more about you. You have a day job as a librarian outside of your work with SLI, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't get to be a librarian too much, but I lead an organization called the Mid-Hudson Library System, which is a cooperative public library system here in New York. So I work with 66 independent public libraries and help them find ways to work together to save money, be smart, learn together, and really just break down barriers to service for the 600,000 plus members of the residents here of the Hudson Valley. So I've worked here for 27 years, the past 7 as director, and I love it. I love working with my libraries, and it's so interesting to see what each library contributes to their local community, which really kind of was what inspired me to get involved in sustainability, which we'll talk about, I know, here later today. But so I'm an executive director. I am administering, I'm networking, I'm talking, I'm raising the visibility of our libraries across the Hudson Valley. But that's my day job, which is pretty fulfilling.
Yeah, big job. What did you say? 66 libraries?
66. Yep. And no,
So
I said they're independent. They all can do whatever they want, but we have to find a way to all work together.
yeah, that's interesting. I'm not familiar with a format like that. They are all independent. You are a consortium.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So tell us about your career path. You've been with the organization a while, 7 years as director. So kind of tell us about that route. How did you get into your current role?
So, when I was an undergrad, my dad, who had been a library trustee for like a decade, he said, I think library school might be a really good match for you. And he had looked into my university where I was already going, and he said, they've got this special program. You could get your master's degree in 2 years. And of course, I didn't do it. I didn't listen to him, and I went off on my own path and went into social work, and really burned out really quick. That's really tough work, as social workers know. And as I kind of sat back and really started to think, what am I going to do here? I was still young, fresh out of my undergrad. My dad, once again, he had clipped a little job ad out of the newspaper and slipped it under my dinner plate for Sunday dinner. And he said, "Hey, I know someone at the Mid-Hudson Library System, and they're hiring. Would you be interested?" And I'm like, "Sure, sounds good," because I didn't know what to do at that point. And I just found my place. I found people that were doing good work, that were working systemically on issues that would prevent what I was seeing on the front lines of social work. And I really felt like this is a spot for me. And I had really supportive mentors who just kept giving me opportunities, helping me go to library school, giving me really exciting opportunities to work with our member libraries. There was a lot of variety of work I was doing. So I really wasn't a practicing librarian. I was always a consultant helping libraries figure out, like, how do you plan spaces for the future? How do you integrate technology and harness it for good here in library land? And then I got to work on what's called the State Aid for Library Construction Program, which is administering state aid for our local libraries to build buildings, renovate, address longstanding problems in historic buildings. So I got really into that and learning everything I could about construction, renovation, how to do it economically, and really in a healthy way, how to do it sustainably. So we were building healthy spaces for library workers and our communities. And that's really where I got very excited about a lot of things that I thought were possible for the future. And then the other side of my work was working on a referendum. So libraries in New York, they have budget votes. The public comes and lets them know, yes or no, we will invest more tax dollars in you. And there's a real science behind that happens, 12 months a year, 365. So I really made a study over 20 years of what does it take to connect well with our communities, really listen to what they're saying, be as relevant and responsive as possible. So when you come to them and say, hey, costs have gone up, this is what it's going to take to keep going and meet your needs, they'll vote yes for you. And so in the 27 years I've done that work, we have a 97% passage rate, hundreds of votes we've helped with over time, both budget votes and building referendum. So sometimes multi-million dollar building referendum. We learned what works there as well. So that's another big part of the work I've done. So I've always done work through the lens of conversation with our communities, respecting taxpayers, doing what's right for library workers. There's a real, there's a lot of ingredients there that go into creating public libraries that will work and are relevant and possible for the future. And a lot of that is the seeding of the ground for the work I do with the Sustainable Libraries Initiative.
So great. You just hit on so many themes that I think will resonate with our GovLove audience of just public communication and building public trust and talking about your administrative role of helping libraries adapt to changing technology and managing public resources well. So thank you. It's like you really packed a lot into a concise response there. And I love kind of your personal story of like, gosh, parents always know, don't they?
Right? Yeah.
Just like so subtly slip in that job ad at your dinner, at your seat at the dinner table.
And he never said, I told you so. And he's always been supportive. And then when I became the director here, his only request was, could I please bring back the card catalog? Because at the
Oh,
time, he didn't like using the online catalog. But now we've got him using the mobile app and he's fine. But I thought it was hysterical. That was the only thing he thought, I'm going to ask for this after, setting her on this career path.
oh, that's so great. Okay, well, I'm going to let you share a little bit more about SLI, but before I do, let me just give a little context for our audience. I want to give a shout out to one of our listeners who reached out to us after listening to GovLove episode number 667 that aired in February of this year. So that episode was entitled Urban Cooling and Climate Action with Brianne Fisher. Our host, Ben Kittleson, and Brianne had a great conversation about the city of Tempe, Arizona's climate action plan and the importance of urban cooling to reduce risk from extreme heat. So I highly recommend any of our listeners who are interested in climate resiliency issues go back and catch that episode if they missed it. But one listener reached out to us and commented that libraries never came up in that discussion and challenged the GovLove host team to shine a spotlight on the role that libraries are playing around the country in local mitigation and resistance plans. So just want to say thank you to that listener for steering us toward the Sustainable Libraries Initiative and to you, Rebekkah, so we can learn more. And I want to encourage our listeners, if you ever have an idea for a topic or a guest that we should be covering on GovLove, send that to us because we really do pay attention and take those seriously. So with that intro, Rebekkah, I'll hand it back to you. You maybe just start by telling us the origin story of how the Sustainable Libraries Initiative got off the ground and why.
Sure. So we've been in existence now for 10 years. This is our 10th year. So that's pretty cool. And it all got started on a train ride from Philadelphia to New York City with my co-founder, Matthew Bollerman, who's a library director on Long Island here in New York. He runs the Hop Hog Public Library. And we had taken a trip together down to Philly to go to what's called Green Build, which is the U.S. Green Building Council's annual conference. He was building a new library, and I had just been certified as a leadership in energy and environmental design accredited professional or a lead AP. And we had, he and I had known each other for a very long time. We reconnected at our state library conference because we both had this shared interest in sustainable design. And a year or two later, decided to go to this conference together. And that was such an eye-opening experience going to a conference in another industry that has money. Our library conference, all the love to my New York Library Association peeps, but man, that conference, I mean, Bon Jovi was the, closing speaker, like the act before Hillary Clinton came on as like the closing speaker. So it was a whole different level of experience. And really the experience of walking through that vendor hall, hearing from architects and city planners that were really doing awesome work on the topic of sustainable design and really resilience planning as well. We were on the train and I was just so frustrated. I was like, why aren't libraries A, part of this conversation, and B, why aren't libraries doing a better job on some of this work themselves? Like, it was a real struggle for me when I was administering the state aid for library construction program to help people see that investing in sustainable design was really smart, that it didn't cost any more to do, and it was resulting in healthier buildings. And but there's a lot of resistance at that time to that work. And he was in agreement, a lot of yesing me while I was talking about that. And he goes, "Well, what are we going to do about it?" And I'm like, "Well, I have a list. Like I have this whole list of things I think libraries should be doing." And he basically called my bluff and he's like, "Well, stop holding this list to yourself and let's put it out there. Like, let's start working on this stuff." And he happened to be president of the New York Library Association. And like that was really where things started to roll. Like we found other people thinking like us, recognizing the need for leadership in our industry on this topic, and not really seeing what we thought was practical advice for, in this case, at this time, public libraries. And so we found a bunch of people who thought like we did. They gave us a little bit of money to convene people and think about what would it take? What would it look like? And one of our operating kind of, or I say compass settings, was we knew we didn't know what we needed to know. And we knew that we didn't have the perfect answer, but we all felt this urgency to start. So there was 20 of us in New York here who just got together at this very cool retreat center and just talked it out. Like, what would it look like? What do you need? We needed vocabulary that people understood. We needed checklists that people could follow. We needed a community of practice for us to learn from each other and iterate faster on things. And legit, that's what we created over the past 10 years. So at this point, we have over 220 libraries across North America and now Greece who have joined the what's called Sustainable Library Certification Program. We have a community of practice of over 7,000 library folks from not only public libraries, but also academic libraries and school librarians. And we have folks from all over the world now contributing to our community of practice. So what it's resulted in is clarity in what we mean when we talk about sustainability, resilience, and climate action, and how it translates to operating a library, running a building, making decisions on an everyday basis about your services, programs, and partnerships, all with an eye towards being a really authentic partner in creating resilient communities that respect what an asset a library is in that environment, because I think people underestimate what a library brings to the table. And so we don't have everything that's needed, but we bring a lot to the table that people often overlook. So it really has been a holistic approach to how libraries reposition themselves for the future in light of climate change and a lot of the geographic threats that climate change brings to the table. So we have focused very hard on the certification program because we think it's really about organizational change and how people think about running an organization and making decisions. So this story has not just been about this initiative, it's also become part of the American Library Association story, and that we now have sustainability adopted as a core value. It's now mandated to be taught in library school. It's a much bigger movement than these 20 folks who got together in New York. It's really, really gone pretty far, which is we're really excited about because that's what's called for in this moment, is a lot of people all pulling in the same direction much faster than we have in the past.
Yeah, it's incredible what you've accomplished in a relatively short amount of time from a very grassroots start. I'd love to hear more about the certification program. So just tell us more what that program is and how many communities are certified nationwide.
So we had this wonderful person at that first retreat, 20 people, Lisa Matei. She's the director of a library upstate in the Mid-York Library System. And she was getting her MBA at the time and studying organizational change. And she said, change doesn't happen without urgency. And so we recognized that there was just too much like that fell under the umbrella when you said sustainability. Like people sometimes thought you were talking about finance. Sometimes they thought you were talking about the building. Sometimes they thought you were talking about Earth Day and going green. We also recognized people didn't understand how urgent the call was at that time for climate action. And we're not hearing what scientists were telling us because of a lot of, I think, political maneuverings to control some of the outcomes of what scientists were telling us. So the certification program became a way to get people to have a foothold in what are we actually talking about. So some of our first steps was vocabulary to make sure we were all talking the same language, and getting ALA, the American Library Association, to create sustainability as a core value, defined it using what we call the triple bottom line, which is a business term, but you described it in the intro there, that we want to see balance amongst environmental stewardship, social equity, and economic feasibility, because that helps answer all of the other obstacles people were throwing at us. And we would say, oh, you should build a greener building. Oh, but it costs too much. Well, actually, if you do it on the right timeline and have the right professionals, it doesn't cost any more than regular construction. Oh, well, I don't think, our local workforce can do this. Well, actually, we kept, we wanted to just, bat down all of those things that people were saying were the barriers to doing this work. But what we recognized is that it couldn't just be this one segment of the work at a time. It had to be a holistic approach so that people adopted a mindset of using the triple bottom line as a decision-making lens for everything. From what pens you are buying for the office supply closet to what building you are building or renovating to what communities we're creating for the future. And yes, I understand that sounds very ambitious, but librarians are really smart people, and so are the trustees who govern them through the volunteer work they do as governing boards. And they want to do the best they can for their community. And so we really felt there was enough methodologies we could merge into a certification program that would not only kind of I think, surface a lot of the work that there was to be done, but also make sure we were educating folks to just make decisions in a different way, because we're not going to be able to think of absolutely everything you're ever going to do as a library in a certification program. So a lot of it is designed as an organizational change exercise to change the way people think, to change their mindset. But what they're doing is practicing using the triple bottom line as a decision-making tool throughout operational decisions, how we clean our buildings, how we manage landscaping, how we build new buildings or think about HVAC systems, and then into, how we're designing programs, how we build collections for our public, what partnerships we seek out to truly be an impactful and authentic organization, and looking at the finances of our libraries, what's going to impact the economy in the next few years, and how should we be preparing for that in the future so we can be there when the community needs us. So we took a non-traditional approach. If you look at any other certification program, from LEED for buildings to green business certification programs, this does something different. It pulls all of it together and really helps people think differently by the end of it. And so then we had to practice that. So at the beginning, it was all of us who were those 20 who stepped up to kind of figure this out and put it together. Almost all of us now have certified our own organizations, which really was the proof of concept. And then it just took off and started running. So we have over 65 libraries across the country that have been completely certified. That includes public, academic, and school librarians. And then we have 227 currently in the pipeline working on the certification. So we have more people joining every week. We've had to really build our capacity because we have a mentor program. Each library gets a mentor. And so we've had to really make sure we build for success in a kind of a way that, no one's ever really done this before. So we've had to figure it all out ourselves.
Yeah, it's amazing. Do you have any anecdotes of some benefits that you have seen for communities that have gone through the certification process?
Well, Lauren, I saw that we're only talking together for 60 minutes today. So I'm going to try to keep it down. But each library that's gone through has come out with, I would say, more than a dozen stories to celebrate what they've accomplished. And that's pretty cool. But one of our favorites was one of our board members, actually. She had been working, she decided to go through the certification program with her library. This was the Lindenhurst Library down in Suffolk County, because their building referendum went down there. And that was really hard for them to hear. The community wasn't supportive of what they were doing, but it was a wake-up call that they were not listening well enough, integrated into the community well enough. And she used the certification program to kind of turn that ship around, to think differently about how they were being present in the community, using the certification as kind of the blueprint for getting out into the community, talking to people, rethinking some of the building design features they were doing. And then they easily passed that referendum the next time around because they'd done the work.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing that came out of that process is she raised the visibility of the library on this topic. So they were now talking about sustainability and doing programs that were helping people get prepared for future bad weather, and talking that talk that legislators recognized and administrators at the county level recognized, because that's what they were working on. And there was this very cool moment about 4 years ago. On Earth Day, the county executive chose that library's parking lot to make a big announcement of a multi-million-dollar investment in EV charging stations that would be located at libraries. And in the daytime, library patrons could use them and community members can use them. And in the evening, the county fleet would be charging there overnight. And so that was exactly what we were looking for. that recognition that libraries are a leader on this topic, we're smart infrastructure, we're in every little town across the country, we can really accelerate the goals that municipalities have for this work. So that's one of my absolute favorites. The other one I love is from the smallest library who's ever gone through the certification program. So the other goal we have for certification program is that it's scalable. That whether you are a library serving 1,000 people or you're the San Diego County Public Library serving 3 million people, this works for you. And that has been proven so far. But our tiniest library serves a community of 1,100 people. It's the Mamakating Library here in New York. And because of the work they did in the certification program, they are now the convener of an annual meeting of the library, the police chief, the fire chief, the town supervisor, and the school superintendent. They meet every year and compare their disaster plans and talk about how to help each other. And that wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the library convening them. So when we think about small libraries, they're often even more intimately connected in a community than some of our larger libraries to what people need and what's going on. So I thought that was another great example of what can happen when we are deliberately mindful about doing this work in a way that connects with others.
Yeah, that's incredible. Great examples. Thank you for sharing. I'm sorry we don't have time to dive into more, but um, we're going to give you a chance to talk about some other aspects of the SLI work. I want to pivot for a minute, though. When we were having our conversations to prepare for this interview, you shared some of your perspective of having personally dealt with ramifications of severe climate events in your own career. And you talked about kind of your evolution in your work as a library professional. And I thought that was so interesting. So, for the benefit of our listeners, what professional development have you pursued to stay relevant as demands on library resources have changed over time?
Mm. It's been interesting because and I almost hate to admit this publicly, but I really didn't work as a librarian in a traditional way for very much of my career. I'm certainly familiar with the work, I understand it, but my job was to make sure libraries are vital, visible, and vibrant for the future. And like, how do I make sure people want to keep investing in libraries? So I did a lot of work to understand what libraries contribute to social infrastructure. What does it look like when you have a great library that people appreciate and love and come together in? So a lot of my studies have been not only on sustainable design of physical spaces, but also placemaking. How do you design spaces that people want to be in and want to come together? Because libraries are one of the few nonpartisan spaces you can be in without paying an entry fee. And so the more people we can get in there to learn together, to socialize together, just to be neighbors together, the healthier our communities are going to be. So a lot of my work has been not only on sustainable design, but that placemaking idea. And then I've taken a keen interest, obviously, in resilient design features. As we've watched here in New York, just this summer, we've had at least 3 extraordinary rain events, dropping multiple inches of rain in a very short period of time. That's overwhelming stormwater management systems. It's pulling down trees because the ground is too soft and the trees are just flopping over onto electrical lines, which is then causing extended power outages. And I really see a strength of libraries for the future as bridging some of those gaps and filling a need in the aftermath of these events. But that means our buildings need to be up to the challenge. So we need buildings that are resilient in the face of what is predicted here as climate change continues to fuel very severe weather that's happening more frequently. So we want to see buildings that have the infrastructure they need, not only to deliver public library service, but to help people we call them first restore services in the aftermath of some of these events where you can come charge your phone or meet with FEMA or just, get a rest or a place that actually is cool or warm depending on the season. So very interested in that aspect as well as that combination of the physical built space with the social infrastructure needs of a community, because that's really the sweet spot for libraries, particularly public libraries moving forward, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you and I talked about this a little bit, like even just in my 2-decade career in local government, I feel like libraries have changed and evolved so much from when I started. And I think libraries have been more adaptable than many of the other service lines in municipal government of trying to just be responsive to the community need of the moment. And that there's a real lesson there for the more traditional, like city hall service lines. So look at libraries as a model for innovation and community responsiveness. And certainly the work that you're doing speaks to that.
I think it was hard earned in the aftermath of the advent of the internet. A lot of
Mm,
people questioned, oh, do we still need libraries? And I cannot tell you how many times I've answered that question. Are people still use libraries? I could just Google everything. It's like, well, you truly, maybe you don't understand exactly what a library is, so let me help you out. But we are educational institutions. And while, for maybe 100 years, it was book centric, the truth is we're educators, and our job is to iterate as we understand better educational research, which revealed not everyone learns well by reading. Some people need to hear a presenter or an expert on something. Some people need a hands-on experience to really learn something. And so library spaces, when you look at how different they are from 1970 compared to 2025, what you're seeing is that evolution understanding of how people learn. So you're seeing absolutely collection space for books and magazines and graphic novels, but you're seeing learning spaces where you can teach in a computer lab or an auditorium style seating. You're seeing maker spaces and fix-it clinics being built into new libraries where people can come and learn how to fix stuff together. So I think, they've really just been loyal to their role as educators, and that's the evolutionary path that I see reflected in those innovations. But it was very much due to people questioning our mission and what we were really up to, and us being kind of like, we'll show you.
I love it. Talk to us about the National Climate Action Strategy for libraries. What is the relevance of that national strategy at the local level?
So it kind of follows the motto we've been talking about all along, which is getting more library folks on the same page and moving faster. And the Sustainable Libraries Initiative was part of that. Having sustainability claimed as a core value was part of that. But then we have to operationalize that as a core value. And that's the newest core value. It sits alongside intellectual freedom and privacy, access, equity, and the public good. And those have had several decades of marination and education and research, whereas sustainability just was named in 2019. And so, as we continue to explain to people what this means, how to really bring it out in the work from a day-to-day basis, we're still kind of really focused on moving faster. And so, this was a way we felt we could get even more people moving in this direction. Maybe they haven't connected with the certification program, but they can be building in with deliberate foresight into their strategic plans, their facility plans, this strategy. So the idea was to really help people understand where to focus their energy, because there's no shortage of good ideas of what we could do under the mantle of climate action, but do we truly understand where our time is best spent? So that's where the strategy comes in, is to help folks understand, if you are going to do work in this area, put your energy over here, put your time and energy over here. So it identifies three things. One is the need for the concurrent nature of both reduction of greenhouse gases for future generations, while at the same time adapting in the face of what's already happening thanks to climate change. And you'll see many municipal climate action plans echo the same call. And then ours has a third component, which is climate justice work, to really help people understand that when you're reducing greenhouse gases and doing disaster preparedness and recovery planning, you have to think about the whole community, not just the people around that particular table. And so libraries often can be the voices for some folks in the community who can be unheard in some of those processes or the development of those processes. So we really want to see libraries harnessing that kind of transformational outcomes that education can have for the purposes of this work, and really still pull that thread through climate action work as well. So the climate action strategy itself is only 1 page long, just those three items. And then there's an implementation guide to kind of bring it to life for people, how to talk about this, what does it look like in other communities. So our hope is that accelerates adoption of this work across the library world.
Got it. Rebecca, it's not really a secret that climate change conversations can be politically divisive. Do you have any advice for libraries or other local government professionals about how to navigate climate mitigation strategies without becoming a political lightning rod?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this, because when we were developing the National Climate Action Strategy, we did a national survey of library administrators and directors. We had over, I think, 1,100 respond to the survey. It was a really good response in our opinion. But the number one item they identified as a barrier to this work was fear of backlash. fears that they would be categorized as too woke or too liberal, or really, if, in some of our libraries in more conservative areas of the country, they said, I could lose my funding over this. And so, of course, we don't want that to happen. We want people to understand libraries are for everyone. That includes everyone across the political spectrum. And so, what we've learned over time is very often, I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but very often it boils down to semantics, like what words we use to describe what we're doing and what our goals are. Because a lot of times we'll go in to help a community and they'll bring up this concern. But if I go onto the municipal website, I'll find some type of plan, whether they call it a mitigation plan or a resilience plan or a disaster preparation plan, that reflects all of the same actions we want libraries to be doing as well. So we really encourage our library folks to learn the language of that municipality, of that county, of that area of the country, and recognize that you're not compromising doing the right thing. You might just be using different words than we use here in New York, or that you use in California, or that in the middle of the country, we need to learn sometimes to use that language on other parts of the coasts here in the country. So I can't say the vocabulary will fix it all, but what I do think fixes a lot of it is understanding that most people in public service and throughout our communities want the same thing, which is a safe community where families thrive, where businesses thrive, and really we protect not only the humans, but the assets of the community. How we go about doing that work, there's really a lot of best practices out there that most places have adopted, but how we talk about it can look different from area to area in the community. So we really ask folks to slow down and learn the language of the effort in your area and right size that approach, recognizing work that's already been done, vocabulary that's already established, and make what you're doing fit that frame, because you're not going to necessarily get as far if you don't.
A lot of sense. You've mentioned this a couple of times in our conversation that the American Library Association adopted sustainability as a core value for librarianship. And just talk more about that. Like, what does that mean? What are the other core values, and how does having sustainability as an ALA core value shape library services at a local level?
So when we thought about how to accelerate work in this area, we recognized we were never going to do it shouting from down here at like one little state conference or me writing one article in Library Journal. We really needed it embedded in the ethos of the profession. And so that idea of even a profession having core values is a very good thing. And when we started this work, there was, I believe, 12 core values, which is kind of interesting when you think about prioritizing things. It's difficult to prioritize that many things. But having core values in an organizational structure is the compass settings for how we make decisions. That this is what we prioritize, this is what we design to. So for example, access being a core value, we are constantly working to break down barriers to access to information and education for our library patrons. This means sometimes tough negotiations with vendors to protect patron privacy and get access to materials they don't necessarily want to license to us. It takes many different forms, but that's a priority for us because we know libraries are for everyone. Not everyone has the money to access this stuff. Not everyone can read beyond an eighth grade level. Like, we need to always be conscientious about that work. And so putting sustainability and that idea of prioritizing environmental stewardship, social equity, and economic feasibility as a triple threat there, that combination, we want that now as a lens through which we make decisions and prioritize the work of our institutions. So as we consider policies, not only do we think about, well, how does this affect patron access to something, we have to think about sustainability. Well, how does, climate change might compromise our ability to get to the building. Can we also offer that online, just as we iterated during COVID? Or can we make a better decision about a product to buy, tomorrow than we did yesterday by educating ourselves that, well, if I buy this pen, I've just ruined the lives of people that weren't paid a living wage, and we stripped the natural resources out of a community versus using something where people were treated ethically in the workplace, and we used, post-consumer waste to create that pen. So we can live those values out loud if we're educated, if we make it a priority. So that was the goal of creating sustainability as a core value. And I think it really has, we're seeing change since 2019, since we did that. Not as much as I would like, but you can definitely see the ripple effects of that happening. You're seeing now libraries adopting it locally as a core value of mandating eco-literacy classes for purchasers, purchase officers in their organization. These little changes over time really, I think, is where we're going. But we also want people to work a little faster than they have, particularly on the areas of disaster preparedness, because I mean, I just think we're getting hammered by crazy weather that's jeopardizing our people and our places.
Goes as fast as we'd like it to, but that sounds like a lot of progress in what, 6 years?
Yeah.
I'm pretty impressed. All right, well, you've thrown a lot of great information at us. What advice do you have for our listeners who want to learn more and want to get involved? And I'm going to ask you to come at that question from two angles. So, for our librarians in the audience who might be interested in becoming a part of SLI or the certification program, and then give us your advice for the non-librarians in the audience, maybe our emergency managers or our city manager's office professionals who've heard this conversation and now want to know how they can better loop their libraries into the broader community resiliency strategy.
So librarians, of course, come on over to the Sustainable Libraries Initiative website, sustainablelibrariesinitiative.org. You can sign up for the newsletter, check out the presentations of people who have finished the certifications. It's an absolute treasure trove of ideas and success stories. And then check to see if your state library association has a partnership with the Sustainable Libraries Initiative, because if they do, you have free membership to get to a lot of other resources that are available on that website. And you also get a discount on doing the certification program. But I would say just dip your toe in, become a member of the community of practice. You're welcome to come to our monthly meetups, hear from folks that are kind of grinding on some issues where they don't quite know, where to buy that pen I was just describing or whatever their particular challenges. Sometimes they're real micro and sometimes they're pretty macro. But people can get what they need when they need it thanks to that community of practice. So I think that's a great place to start. I'll also give a shout out to what's called the Sustainability Roundtable of the American Library Association, another fun kind of community of practice, sharing ideas, getting great ideas for programs and books for the collection. That's very focused on the services that we provide and really helping. They've also done some good work on managing grief around the topic of climate change. And I think that's something I did want to bring up while we were talking is how overwhelming it is to think about the systemic nature of climate change and how it just touches on absolutely everything we're doing today. And we really want people to find hope through their libraries, to see libraries. We've always thought of ourselves as empowerment engines. You can change your life at your library, and to really see libraries as a partner in, confronting the climate crisis and some of the things we're most concerned about. But the Sustainability Roundtable of the American Library Association, they've done specific programming for library workers on managing the grief you may be feeling. If you're feeling hopeless about what's happening or you don't understand what your role is moving forward, they have some really great resources to help at a professional development level on that topic. And I think for our non-librarians in the audience, get to know your local library. They might surprise you. They might surprise and delight you of what they're doing, but also what they're capable of. So as you're thinking about your own mitigation plans, climate adaptation plans, recognizing what an asset the library is. It might be the physical infrastructure. It might be the fact that they are staffed with information professionals that understand technology. They also have a lot of outlets in the building. But what we're also noticing, just at a conference in June, more libraries are starting to think about the role themselves. So we're seeing libraries and municipalities partnering on infrastructure projects. I spoke to a library trustee from Louisiana who, when they rebuilt their library after the last hurricane, they redesigned the parking lot with the understanding they will be a distribution center for ice and food in the aftermath of future hurricanes. So the parking lot is actually designed to manage a high level of traffic snaking through there to come and pick up stuff. And the refrigeration capabilities of that building are not what you would find in a typical public library. But now we understand, because you have that infrastructure, again, located in every community across the country, if we kind of co-locate our thinking about what it can be, we can still be a public library and do all the awesome things we do there, but also augment the adaptation plans of a municipality. So I would think recognizing a library as an asset, getting to know your local library a little better, inviting the library director to the table for conversations in this realm, those are all really positive first steps towards stronger collaborations in a community.
Great advice. Thank you. And You mentioned in there that a library is a place you can go to change your life, and our audio listeners do not have the benefit of seeing what I can see on the screen, which is a beautiful sign positioned right behind Rebekkah that says "Libraries change lives," which I think is just a nice segue as we wrap up our conversation. Rebekkah, before we close out, is there anything else that you want to share?
Oh, thank you for that segue because I really think people underestimate what libraries are capable of. And when you think about the fact that 50% of Americans, which rises every year, have library cards. And you think about each one of those hundreds of millions of people going in, they each have a story. And they're each doing maybe something a little different. You know, it might be a parent bringing their kid to learn how to read. It could be an older person in our community who, in their workplace life, never got a chance to learn how to use computers, but they're going to learn now. They're turning to the library. You know, we look at what some of the biggest global threats are to human health and the economy. Artificial intelligence is something people are really concerned about, and they're turning to their trusted information professionals at their local library to help them navigate what's going on there. So I think there's not just the area of climate action, but the whole concept of having a healthy, resilient community. A lot of that work is happening at your library. So to make sure that libraries are getting the respect they deserve, being invited to the table, and really celebrated as the community catalysts that they have been for many years, they're going to be all the more important in the coming years, given what we are faced with. And they are, and I know I'm biased, but they are exactly what the world needs right now.
I'm biased too. I think you're preaching a good message.
I knew I liked to learn.
All right. Thank you so much for joining the GovLove podcast. I have just one final question for you, Rebekkah. If you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
So I'm going to admit I had to consult the SLI co-founder, Matthew Bollerman, because he is my
Good.
DJ. He is my lifetime DJ. He has this unbelievable musical collection. And he's like, how can you not know what song to say? And I was like, well, I don't know. There's just like so many to choose from. He goes,
Yeah.
it's obviously This Land Is Your Land. It's like, all
Oh,
right, that's a good one. That's a good one.
okay. That wasn't what I was expecting, but it's great.
But I think that whole idea that we're all in this together,
We're
this
all in
land is
this
your
together.
land. We're all trying
That
to figure out how to create that healthy place for all of us to thrive in.
it's a beautiful message. And yeah, it really syncs up with our conversation today about climate resiliency and sustainability. Rebekkah, thank you so much for shining a light on the great work that libraries are doing in this space. And I hope it encourages some of our listeners to reach out and get involved with SLI. So thank you so much, Rebekkah, and the Sustainable Libraries Initiative. And to our audience, thank you for listening. You can reach us at elgl.org/govlove or on social media at GovLove Podcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.
And I followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts, and all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.